South Carolina's season has turned into a fascinating Rorschach test, depending on which game you choose to focus on. Look at the overtime collapse in Norman against Oklahoma, and you'll hear whispers that the Gamecocks are slipping, that the dynasty edge has dulled. Watch what happened next against Vanderbilt, and the narrative flips entirely. This wasn't just a response, it was a statement, and maybe an uncomfortable one for the rest of the SEC. Vanderbilt arrived in Columbia unbeaten, confident, and statistically disciplined, a team that had made a habit of turning games into controlled, low-scoring battles. Less than 2 minutes in, that identity was ripped apart. South Carolina didn't just score, it overwhelmed. Pressure defense forced turnovers at a rate Vanderbilt simply hadn't faced all season, and suddenly a perfect record looked fragile. By the time the Commodores briefly steadied themselves late in the second quarter, the Gamecocks had already bent the game in their favor. Here's the controversial part. This game said as much about Vanderbilt's ceiling as it did about South Carolina's power. Michaela Blake still got her points, because elite scorers always do, but the turnovers told the real story. When Vanderbilt was pushed out of its comfort zone, it didn't have a second gear. That's not an indictment of their season, but it is a warning about what March basketball demands. For South Carolina, the win was cathartic, but it didn't erase the questions raised in Oklahoma. Dawn Staley's team can look unbeatable when its defense is dictating pace, yet vulnerable when that edge softens. The irony is that the Oklahoma loss may have sharpened this response. The Gamecocks played like a team offended by recent criticism, flying into passing lanes and attacking in waves. 5 players in double figures wasn't just balance. It was depth weaponized, and yet, balance cuts both ways. The same team that allowed 94 points in overtime days earlier just held a top 5 opponent to 74 while forcing 20 turnovers. That swing is jarring. It suggests South Carolina's floor is still championship level, but its margin for error might be thinner than in past seasons. So where does that leave the SEC? Somewhere between chaos and clarity. Oklahoma proved that belief and urgency can crack even the most established power. South Carolina proved that when locked in, it can still dismantle contenders without mercy. Vanderbilt learned that being undefeated is one thing, surviving pressure is another. The truth, as always, lives in the tension between those results. South Carolina isn't broken, and Vanderbilt isn't exposed beyond repair. But the Gamecocks reminded everyone why the road to the title still runs through them, especially when they feel doubted.